everyone, welcome back. I'm Melissa Pineda, and today I will be discussing the book Orthodoxy by G.K. Chesterton. So I've reviewed a few other things from Chesterton lately, The Everlasting Man and Heretics, and he's an absolutely incredible author. So I had to read this one because it is actually considered a companion to Heretics. So critics complained about Heretics because it criticized the current philosophies of that time without offering an answer. So this is sort of his answer. This is Chesterton's answer to the critiques of his work, specifically Heretics. And it's an attempt at an explanation. Chesterton says, not of whether the Christian faith can be believed, but how he personally has come to believe it. Chesterton was an English writer and philosopher. He was born in England in 1874 and died in 1936. He joined the Catholic Church in 1922. So prior to that, he says he was agnostic, and then prior to that, he was pagan. And he was a very strong defender of the Catholic faith. And Heretics was published in 1905, and Orthodoxy was published 3 years later as sort of a continuation of his ideas, but also as a rebuttal to his critics that were saying that he didn't provide any answers. He just criticized them and then didn't explain himself. I mean, if you look at my review of Heretics, I think it's pretty evident that his answer is Christ, but he elaborates in Orthodoxy. So he claims, it's a compilation of essays as well, and he claims that they're concerned only to discuss the actual fact that the central Christian theology, sufficiently summarized in the Apostles' Creed, is the best root of energy and sound ethics. He says that Orthodoxy is not intended to discuss the fascinating but quite different question of what is the present seat of authority for the proclamation of that creed. So that's interesting. I think he's kind of speaking to the debate ongoing between Catholics and Protestants. He continues and says that when the word orthodoxy is used here, it means the Apostles' Creed is understood by everybody calling themselves Christian until a very short time ago, and the general historic conduct of those who held such a creed. Chesterton said that he's being forced by mere space to confine himself to what he himself has got from the Apostles' Creed. He does not touch the matter, he says, much disputed among modern Christians of where we ourselves got it from. And this is not an ecclesiastical treatise, he says, but a sort of autobiography. So this is about his faith and his faith alone, and how he has come to reach the beliefs that he holds so dear, and why he is such a strong Catholic. And he doesn't kind of concern himself in this with explaining himself as to why. Like, he explains, this is why I feel this way, but he's not going to further explain himself apart from that. He's not going to get into arguments that space doesn't allow for in Orthodoxy. So he says that the vices of the modern world were let loose with the Reformation, but so were the virtues. And he says that it's the virtues, the people's virtues and what they consider the virtues that they hold, that do more terrible damage. So he says that the modern revolutionist is an infinite skeptic and is engaged in undermining his own mind. So there are always contradictions in their arguments. And basically what I got from this is that they don't stand for anything. So they continue to criticize and argue and tear down, but like, what do they stand for, in other words? So the modern man, he says, has become useless in terms of revolt. By rebelling against everything, he has lost his right to rebel against anything. So again, if you stand for everything, you don't really stand for anything, right? If you stand for every cause that comes your way, you jump on every bandwagon, what do you actually stand for? Chesterton says that altruists denounce Christ as an egoist, and egoists denounce him as an altruist. Moderns are puzzled by his insane magnificence, Chesterton says, and his insane meekness. So what he's commenting on is the fact that Jesus said that he was the Son of God, but Jesus was also incredibly meek and weak. This was a man that didn't encourage violence, that forgave sins, that self-sacrificed, that promoted, humility, turned the other cheek. So this was someone that, never lived before, obviously, but the ideas that Jesus put forward in the time when, like, there was the Roman Empire and life was short and brutal and there was so much violence and savagery, and in comes Jesus, is incredible. So that's what he's kind of talking about, that, yeah, people are puzzled. Moderns, he says, in this case, are puzzled by Jesus's insane magnificence and insane meekness. And Chesterton says the democratic faith is this, that the most important things must be left to ordinary men themselves. So the mating of the sexes, the rearing of the young, the laws of the state, this is democracy, and in this I've always believed, he claims. So people think that democracy is opposed to tradition, but that's not the case. He says if we attach importance to ordinary men in dealing with everyday matters, there is no reason why we should disregard it when dealing with history. So people are so quick to dismiss history, to dismiss historical figures, especially in today's society, as if, they didn't know what they were talking about, right? But yet we rely on or encourage quote unquote ordinary men to lead society now. So he's just saying that, we can't forget about history, that it seems very tempting for many people to do this. Tradition may be defined as an extension of the franchise. Tradition means giving votes to the most obscure of all classes, our ancestors. He had a very interesting way of writing. So, I mean, for that alone, you should give any of his books and writings a chance. He just writes on another level completely. Very interesting to read, and I feel as though you need to kind of sit with it and then read it over a few times before you're really able to take away much of anything. I myself have felt that way. But anyway, that's what I'm trying to do here for you. I'm trying to give you these important points that he makes so you can sit with them and you can decide if you want to give this book a try yourself. Anyway, let me get back to it. So, tradition refuses to submit to the small and arrogant oligarchy that happens to be walking about. I like that part. Chesterton says that you can't separate tradition from democracy, which makes sense. He also talks about a little bit more in depth of his own struggle in terms of arriving at his beliefs. And he mentions that the modern philosopher told him that we're in the right place, and yet he still felt depressed. And I found that very interesting. So he's saying at that time, the modern philosopher told him, listen, you're in the right place. Like, this is where you're meant to be. This is life. Like, this is, you live it. This is what you do. There's maybe a certain way of going about it. You meet someone, you get married, you have kids. Like, that. This is what you do. You work until X number of, until, you're a certain age, and then you retire, and etc. So he's saying, like, he still felt depressed. However, the Christian optimism is based on the fact that we do not fit into the world. Christianity says that we're actually in the wrong place right now. We don't belong here. It's only transitory. Chesterton says that Christianity is the only answer. Christianity has maintained that the danger is not in men's environment, but in men themselves. It is unchristian, he claims, to trust the rich and assume they are morally superior to the poor, and that it's always easier to be heavy than it is to be light. So Satan fell by the force of gravity, he claims. So Christianity insists on the transcendence of God, and with this we get wonder and curiosity. By insisting God is inside man, man is always inside himself then. By insisting that God transcends man, man has essentially transcended himself. So there's a lot here. You can read into almost everything he writes, and I'm just sort of listing these as I noticed them in the book, things that jumped out at me. And so to get more of an elaboration on these, topics and sentences and quotes. You're going to have to pick up the copy for yourself and check it out. But I'm just going to continue to kind of like raise the points I found really relevant to Chesterton's main argument here. Chesterton says that to Christians, existence is a story, and it's not the end of the story. So existence, it's just part of the story, and our life on earth is a transitory one. So God must have been a rebel as well as a king, he says. I really love that quote. It's a good one. God must have been a rebel as well as a king. I believe in Christianity, Chesterton says, because of the evidence. He says it's in an enormous accumulation of small but unanimous facts. Chesterton talks about what the Catholic Church means to him, and he says that the church in its practical relation to his soul is a living teacher and not a dead one. He says it continues to teach him. It's a living church. He says that a boy is only taught at school when it's too late to teach him anything. He says that the real thing has already been done already, like at home before the boy goes to school. And he says, and I quote, "And thank God it's nearly always done by women. Every man is womanized merely by being born." It's such a good line. When you're young, he claims, and your mom tells you ants bite, and then you find out they do bite. And then when you're told it snows in winter, and then it snows. He says the whole world was a fairyland of wonderful fulfillments, prophecy after prophecy come true when you're young. And he talks a lot like this. This is how Chesterton writes. You know, he writes beautifully. For him, orthodoxy means mental emancipation. Chesterton says that Christianity is the only frame for pagan freedom. He talks more about pagans. He says they don't believe in any meaning in the universe, and they believe in the land of anarchy. Pagans seem to find the little things more joyous than Christians. So life in general is found to be more joyous by pagans than by Christians, he says. But a big thing like death, pagans find less joyful than do Christians. They're sad when it comes to dying, whereas Christians are not. Joy was the small publicity of the pagan and the gigantic secret of the Christians. Chesterton says that the Stoics, both ancient and modern, were proud of hiding their tears, and that diplomatists today are proud of restraining their anger, but that Jesus did neither of these things. He didn't hide his tears, and he didn't restrain his anger. He references the temple where Jesus overturned the tables, flung furniture down the steps, and asked everyone how they expected to escape the damnation of hell. Jesus did not hide his tears or his anger, but Chesterton says he did hide something. He says that Jesus was shy about something when he went off to pray by himself, for instance, or when he was silent. There was some one thing too great for God to show us when he walked upon our earth. And Chesterton says he fancies it was his mirth. So his gladness, his rejoicing. So that's how he ended Orthodoxy. And I hope you've enjoyed this discussion on it. If any of what I've said has interested you, by all means, pick up a copy of this book. It is quite the read. Fantastic. Chesterton is an incredible author. And if you have any questions or comments, by all means, leave them below. If you haven't already, please subscribe. And until next time.